ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ॐ त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव। ओम गुरुदेव भगवान शिव शंकर भोलेनाथ कैलाशपति महाराज की जय। भगवान व्यास जी महाराज की जय। शंकराचार्य भगवान की जय। स्वामी चिन्मयानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी दयानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी प्रभुधानंद भगवान की जय। माता पिता की जय। सभी गुरु देवताओं की जय। सभी गुरु देवताओं की जय। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारी हे नाथ नारायण वासुदेवाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। We had been looking at chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. Yesterday we had seen verse number 7. Yasatvi indriyani mansa niyambhayarabhate arjuna karmendriye karma yogam asakta savisheshyate. Whereas Arjuna, the one who is controlling the sense organ with the mind, remaining unattached, takes to the yoga of action, that is, action performed with yoga buddhi, with the organs of action, is far superior than not doing actions. This is what Krishna, the person who can control his or her sense pursuits, has discrimination, viveka. The control is through the mind only. The word manasa, through the mind, implies viveka. Manasa being another word for buddhi, intellect. The control, to control one's organ of action and sense pursuit, in other words, having a mastery over them, is to direct them at will. Such a person is not attached to karma phala. The result of action begins. Arbhate takes to a life of karma yoga, meaning the person performs karma as a yoga, as a sadhana, a means. One cannot do karma yoga, one can only have it, because karma yoga is strictly an attitude with reference to action and its result. Then actions to be done may be of Vedic karmas, spiritually enjoyed rituals, or Laukika karma, consisting of all other activities. To say that karma yogi is far better does not mean that mithyachara mentioned in the previous words is good. One person is sitting dwelling on things being lazy, and the other person is active and has karma yoga attitude. Because the karma yogi accomplishes everything, he or she is far superior to the other person who is simply hypocrite. Not merely superior, there is no comparison at all. The karma yogi accomplishes the ultimate purushartha moksha, but the hypocrite achieve nothing even in the relative sense. Now we'll see verse number 4. Doing what is to be done is superior than inaction. We have to keep on doing actions. नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्म ज्यायो ह्य कर्मणः शरीरयात्रापि च ते न प्रसिद्धयेद कर्मणः. त्वं, you, niyatam, what is to be done, niyatam, karmaha, action, kuru, do, he, because akarmanaha, when compared to an action, karma, action, jayaha, jayaha, superior, akarmanaha, due to inaction, sharir yatra, maintenance of the body, api, even, parasiddhiyate, prasiddhiyat, would become impossible. Do action that is to be done, because action is superior than inaction. Even the maintenance of your body would be impossible by inaction. The word niyatam refers to karma that is enjoyed by the Shastra by telling Arjuna to do those actions that are to be done. Krishna was not suggesting that Shastra would always tell him what was to be done. There are, of course, many situations that Shastra does not cover. But because every situation is a part of the given universe order, the situation itself dictates what is to be done. Thus, you need not to be told that a particular action is to be done at a particular time. Given the situation, what is to be done becomes very obvious. The karma that is obvious is in a given situation, that which is proper is also niyata karma. Niyata karma. It is niyata, either by the order of dharma or because it is enjoyed by the Shastra. In any case, it is the karma that must be done daily, occasionally, whenever. Krishna told Arjuna to perform action because it is definitely superior to doing nothing. Will be accomplished. Nothing will be accomplished. Instead, all that will happen is that the body will become sick and Antakarana, the mind, will become even sicker. Thus, doing karma is definitely superior. The word sharira yatra in the verse refers to the journey of the living body. From birth onwards, it has been journeying even through it reaches certain stage where there are many more stations to be traveled to. Like a train that has not yet reached its destination, the journey of living, Krishna says here, does not take place if actions are not performed. You simply cannot live your life. Even mere survival is not possible. And by merely surviving, you are accomplishing nothing. Life is not mere survival. Even a frog managed to survive. Every living organism has the instinct for survival, and it does survive for long as it can. Since anyone and anything can survive, survival is not considered to be a human accomplishment. Human life especially, is not just for surviving. It is for some accomplishment. This is why the fourfold Purusharthas, human end, security, artha, pleasure, kama, righteousness, dharma, and liberation, moksha, are mentioned in the Shastra. Since there are these ends to be accomplished, we have various desires that impel us to attempt to fulfill them. To just survive, one must at least eat. There is a Swami who is said to be such a great sannyasi that he does not use his hands even for eating. However, he does open his mouth so that someone else can put the food in. Obviously, he does not understand that opening his mouth is an action and closing it is another action. To say nothing of chewing, swallowing, and preparing for the next mouthful. This same Swami will not talk either. He does nothing, and people call him Naishkramya, which it is not. Even eating is not possible if you do no action, and to live, you have to get your food somehow. If you will not use your hands to eat, someone else has to put the food into your mouth. When others have to cook your food and put it in your mouth, there is an action. Earning the money to buy food and material needs to prepare it is also action. Since survival cannot possibly be without action, do what is to be done by you. By telling Arjuna to perform action, Krishna was telling him not to be afraid of action. Arjuna's problem was that his karma was the cause of his being bound. When you do karma, you produce punya and papa, and because of this you are born again. Again you will perform karmas, which again produce punya and papa, because of which you will be born yet again. This is why karma is said to be the villain in the life of sansari. Because karma alone is the cause of your being bound, you conclude that you should not do karma. Karma are inexhaustible. The cycle of life can be looked at through the model of karma. But if we do so, the model must be taken in its entirety. Suppose you say that by not doing any karma at all, there will be no problem, no punya, no papa, and therefore no more birth and death. The cessation of this cycle of birth and death is what is meant by liberation, moksha. Therefore, by not doing anything, you will accomplish moksha. Let others study the Gita. You do not need to, because by doing nothing, you can gain moksha. To this, Shankara replies elsewhere by asking further question. He asks, what about all the karma standing in your account from previous births? Sanchita karma. Who is going to fulfill them? Even if you do nothing in this birth, secondly, when did you decide not to do any more karma? Until you were 40 years old, all you did was karma. What about that karma? It must be fulfilled. Furthermore, can you remain for even the briefest period of time without performing karma? When you have the I am doer notion, you cannot but do karma. In fact, you cannot remain for even a second without performing some action or the other. And if you are not occupied with doing right karma, it will take you no time at all to do wrong karmas. Not doing karma, therefore, is nothing but a pipe dream. There is no such thing as gaining moksha by not doing karma. Of course, karma is the cause for you being bound. No one ever said that karma liberates. Karma definitely binds the jiva. In fact, it is the third strand of the three-stranded knots. Ignorance is the first strand. Ignorance in the form of the notion, I am a doer. Once this ignorance-born notion is there, you cannot avoid the second strand, desire, kama. If you think that you are small, limited and mortal, you will want to be big, full, immortal. All these are desires, because you do not want to be limited by ignorance, limited by the knowledge that you will have limited knowledge. You do not accept ignorance. This means that you want to be free from limitation of knowledge and ignorance, which is another desire. There is also the desire to be happy, to be free from unhappiness, inadequacy, lack. These desires arise because you do not know that you are already full. When this ignorance is there, desires will be there, and of course they will be according to your limited knowledge. Therefore, even your wants are not very big. You may want this and that, but they are all small wants, really. Then in order to fulfill these wants, you perform karma, which produces the punya and papa, that creates new birth for you. Given this ignorance, desire, action, cycle, you remain bound by karmas. This same karma, however, while not itself is realizing factor, can assist in one's realize. If it is done with the attitude of karma yoga, as we have seen, by performing karma in this way, one is released from the hold of raga, dvesha, like and dislikes. Therefore, same karma means a sadhana. In few verses, the karma done in this way is being referred to as jnana. It becomes yoga, and one gains shuddha antakarana, a pure mind. This pure mind, the person gains the knowledge that is moksha. This then is the order. Beginning with the next verse and ending with verse 16, Krishna then talked about karma as means of leading moksha. Doing karma is karma yoga. If karma is done as a karma yoga, it releases you from raga, dveshas, likes and dislikes. Then karma becomes a sadhana. Sadhan for antakaran shuddhi. Antakaran shuddhi is pure mind. Pure mind gains the knowledge that is moksha. This is the order. Now karma yoga releases you from hold of raga and dvesha. How? Let's see. Yagyartha karmano anayatra loko ayam karma bandhanaha tadartha karma kante mukta sanga samachara. Yajanartha karmanaha, other than the karma performed for the sake of yajna. Anayatra, the reference to other karma. Ayam, this person. Lokaha, the one who is enjoyed to do the karma. Karma bandhana, one who is bound by action. Kante, hey Arjuna, O Kante. Tadaratam, for the sake of that yajna. Mukta sangha, being one free from attachment. Karma, action. Samachara, perform. A person is bound by karma if it is not done as yajna, that is as an offering to Ishvara. For this reason, Kante, Arjun, being one free from attachment, performs action for the sake of that yajna. Yajna is very important word in the Vedic literature. Even though the word means a sacrificial ritual, it is in wider sense. Yajna means every action of one's life is performed as an offering to Ishvara. In an act of giving, there is a giver, something given, and a recipient. In an offering such as ritual, one more factor is involved, the place of offering. The altar. Thus there is altar of offering, altar. The reception who is invoked in the offering, and the one who does the offering, and the offering itself. The place of offering, the recipient who is invoked in the offering, and the one who does the offering, and the offering itself. Generally, if an offering, there is a word like swaha or namaha, meaning I offer this salutation. For example, when we say Om Namah Shivaya, it means on to Lord Shiva I offer this salutation, and this is an offering. When this expression is repeated over and over again, it becomes Japa Yagya. Even the food you eat is an offering, although most people do not think of it as such. It offers you look upon the digestive system as digestive fire. The food offered into that fire is an offering, and the altar of this offering is the digestive process, prana itself. Therefore, eating the food is offered to the Lord in the form of prana. Nothing is in the creation is looked upon as something separate from Lord. The Lord is the conscious being, Chaitanya. Only in the conscious being does the activity of digestion take place. And the food offered is not separate from the Lord. This is why the 15th chapter of the Gita and the shloka Brahma Pranam are repeated before eating. Brahma Pranam. These verses make it very clear that everything is the Lord, including the food we eat and the one who eat. Therefore, eating is an offering. In a fire ritual, the altar is the fire, the trough, the oblation is offered into the fire. The offerer is called Yajamana, and the recipient of the offering is Devata. Usually when you offer something to another person, you accept reciprocal treatment. You expect something in return from that person, receiving gifts during the Christmas season or Diwali is a case in point. You offer gift to another, no matter how small, and that person offers you something else too. Because giving gift at Diwali time is convention, a beautiful convention. You have to offer and a return is expected. It is not the gift you are interested in. It is the care and consideration, the remembrance of the other person that counts. Don't look at the gift, the size of the gift. It is the care. The person cares for you and considers you, remembers you. This is what counts. All offering belongs to the Lord alone. But when we offer something to Devata like Indra, reciprocity is not a factor. As a part of Yajna itself, I say in so many words that what I am offering belongs to Indra. It does not belong to me. In this way, everything is looked upon as yajna. As we shall see in the 4th chapter, the breathing process is yajna. The breath that goes out is called prana. The incoming breath when you are breathing is called apana. Apana, prana. When you breathe out, prana is offered to apana, and when you breathe in, the apana is offered back to the prana. This is the way breathing is considered to be yajna. Those who are committed to practice pranayama, control of the breath, are not really doing exercise. They are performing yajna. Prana being Ishvara, the Lord. In the same way, all exercises and yogic postures, asanas, are considered to be yajna. In fact, each asana has its own devata. Indian music is also yajna. In fact, every defined melody, raga is considered to have a head, trunk, and feet. Certain Indian paintings depict each raga the form of goddess. Thus, even raga melodies have their own presiding deities. Anyone aspect in the creation can looked upon as an aspect of Ishvara, and that aspect becomes the presiding deity or a devata. Thus, in any given object, you can invoke the total or an aspect of the total. If it is an aspect, it is called devata. Any functionary such as an eyes, ears, nose, and the other organ has presiding deity, devata, which is but Ishvara. If you look at Ishvara as the material cause of the world, creation, the eyes themselves are Ishvara. And if you look at the Lord as an effective cause, the Lord becomes the presiding deity for the eyes. Without this appreciation of Ishvara, this bhakti, there is no karma yoga. This appreciation is the very attitude that is karma yoga. In fact, thus karma yoga is bhakti yoga. Karma yoga is the bhakti yoga. We are told very clearly that there are only two yogas, karma yoga and jnana yoga. So far, the sake of moksha, there are two possible dedicated lifestyle, jnana yoga and karma yoga. Either one pursues knowledge to the exclusion of everything else, or one performs karma with the proper attitude which implies Ishvara, along with one pursuit of self-knowledge. Bhakti, appreciation of Ishvara, is the common to both sannyasi and the karmi yogi. A sannyasi, jnana yogi, is not without devotion. In fact, this person's entire life is dedicated to appreciation of Ishvara. He or she wants to understand what Ishvara is. The knowledge being Ishvara, nothing but Ishvara is there. Ishvara is the very pursuit. Thus, sannyasi is not a non-devotee, he is a devotee. Because two words, jnana yoga and karma yoga, are used, it is commonly thought that there are two separate pursuits, the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of karma. This misunderstanding leads to the introduction of seemingly third pursuit, the pursuit of bhakti. But how can this be? Suppose a sannyasi is one who renounces all action, karma yogi is one who performs all action, and then there is a third person, a bhakti yogi. Does the bhakti yogi not perform karma? And if not, what will he or she do for bhakti? To worship Ishvara, certain rituals have to be performed. Whatever the person does to express his or her devotion is an action, a karma. This karma yoga, in fact, all that is being done is karma. No, the bhakta might say, I only sing Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. He or she may think that singing Hare Rama is bhakti, but it is an action, a karma performed by the organ of speech, and therefore called vachikam karma. And if while singing the person also claps and dances, the karma becomes kaikam karma, an action performed by the limbs of the physical body. Therefore, the karma is not only oral, it is also physical. In fact, this kind of bhakti can be so physical that it can totally exhaust the person. Bhakti yoga is karma yoga. Bhakti is recognition of Ishvara, and any karma done for the sake of recognition of Ishvara is a yoga. Even if you meditate mentally, it is bhakti because the Lord is involved, and it is also karma because you are doing it with all your will. Any action that comes of your will and is invoking someone is yajna, a karma. Therefore, the expression bhakti yoga is to be taken as karma yoga, bhakti being a common element. Similarly, hatha yoga is a discipline which is a sadhana or indirect means for moksha. Any discipline is either for antahkaran shuddhi, purification of your mind, or for integration and coordination of the physical body. Because there are number of disturbances and many kinds of deficiencies possibly in a person, various disciplines can be helpful. Any discipline is yoga if the purpose is very clear. If not, it can be a problem. Even karate can be a yoga as long as it is done to make you feel invincible. The purpose is not to kick someone but to gain certain degree of fitness and coordination. When there is a commitment to Ishvara, everything becomes yoga. A means. There is no discipline or activity that we can say is not yoga. If the Lord is involved, in the 4th chapter we'll see how many type of activities there are that can, with these everything is covered. What is doing, who is doing it? The person's attitude. The purpose for which an activity is being done, all these make any activity a sadhana, a yoga. So it is important to understand that although yoga has been divided into many different types, the Shastra make it clear that there are only two in fact, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. For the Jnana Yogi or Sannyasi, knowledge alone is yoga because the person is absolved from all duty. It is not that Jnana Yogi does not do any karma whatsoever. It is just that the person is absolved of all obligatory duties. The sannyasi is non-competitive person. He is just not competing. One who does not compete in the society in any way, only then is the person freed from all obligatory duties to pursue knowledge. When sannyasis start incense factories, for example, they have to compete with other incense manufacturers. They have to project the product, proving it is to be better than the other products. Only a person who does not compete in the society can be called sannyasi. Please understand this. When you are not competing with others, only then a person is called sannyasi. There are two yogas and bhakti is common to both of them. All karmas become yoga if they are done keeping Ishvara in view. All karmas become yoga if they are done keeping in view Ishvara. A yajna is karma which is done for the sake of Ishvara. It can be any ritual, worship, prayer, each of which is involved special karma performed only for sake of Ishvara. Bringing up a child is also yajna and is an example of an indirect offering to Ishvara. I am here in this creation and the child is in my keeping. The child has been given to me as a prasada and is to be brought up by me. This is a proper attitude and is therefore karma yoga. Ishvara is recognized and the order involved is seen to be Ishvara. To see things in this way is not an ordinary situation. A person has to be sensitive so that order, that is Ishvara, is as tangible as wall or a rock. This kind of appreciation is what bhakti actually means. The real meaning of bhakti is not just chanting. Although chanting is also bhakti, it is appreciation of Ishvara and the order. The appreciation is what makes you sensitive and gives meaning to your life. Recognizing Ishvara is to be able to see more than what meets the eyes. More than what the eyes see. Bhakti is an appreciation of what is behind and what is in front, the order within the order, seeing everything as Ishvara, and this is also exactly what is meant by karma yoga. By any karma, you are either directly or indirectly related to Ishvara. Karma involves role playing. Something is expected to you. This action is to be done by you because you are placed in this situation. Therefore, you do it. This is how Ishvara's karma works. Otherwise, why are you in the place at this time? Why are you not elsewhere? There is meaning here. You are in this place at this time because there is something to be done by you. This is the law of karma. You see that there is a meaning and that the situation is not a random one. Everything seems to you. Everything seems to have a cause and effect. There is no randomness in the creation. To use Einstein's word, the Lord does not play a dice. Even if he did, being omniscient, he would know exactly they are going to fall, how they are going to fall. Otherwise, he would not be Ishvara. Therefore, he has no need to play dice. Situations do not happen randomly. They happen because they have to happen. If this is understood, you will find that everything, even relationships, become meaningful. To worship the Lord by doing what is to be done by you definitely requires that you see more than the eyes can see. You have to appreciate what is beyond the hands that perform action, not merely the desire, but what is behind the desire. You should appreciate that the desire itself is born of Ishvara. This kind of appreciation is bhakti. In this way, the performer of action worships the Lord indirectly. So there is twofold yajna, direct and indirect. When you perform a karma, a yajna in form of prayer, there is a direct relationship between Ishvara and you. You either evoke Ishvara in form of Devata or deity, or you invoke him as the Lord straight away. Either way, there is a bhakta, a devotee, and there is a yajmana, one who performs the karma. You can do the karma yourself, or it can be done by someone else by proxy, like when you ask the priest to conduct a ritual on your behalf. Either way, the result comes to you alone, the yajmana. Direct or indirect yajna. Karma that invokes Devata or Ishvara directly becomes direct yajna. Any other karma done with the awareness of Ishvara becomes indirect yajna, because yajna, direct or indirect, is done for the sake of Ishvara. Ishvara is called yajna. This section of Gita provides a beautiful description of bhakti and converts karma into yoga. Everything can be seen here, the order, the ecology, and so on. And every level there is ecology. The ecology of thought, the ecology of karma, the ecology of action. Ecology is an excellent word, having brought into the light certain understanding that did not exist previously. Ecology is now a commonly used word because there is necessity for it. Pollution now being a recognized problem. Ecology is recognized here at different levels. All the devatas, the elemental forces, are doing their job and should not be disturbed. Because you are a conscious being with a free will, even the ecology of the divine forces can be disturbed by your actions. If you are abusing your free will, you are disturbing the ecology of dharma, which is going to affect all humanity. Whatever is disturbed is not going to remain without producing undesirable results. There is an order, and wherever there is an order, there is an ecology. Here Krishna is talking at the dharma level. Dharma alone should govern your free will. Once freedom is given to you, you can do whatsoever you want. There is no hindrance whatsoever. If freedom can be hindered, it is not freedom. Therefore, because you have a free will, you can commit homicide and even suicide. Since there is the possibility of abusing freedom at different level, there should be an ecology with reference to the freedom given. It seems that only ecology we are concerned about disturbing is the ecology of flora and fauna. This attitude comes from human selfishness. We tend to think only about how we are going to be affected by this or that. But there is so much more to ecology than this. Ecology is very awareness, the one's action and how they have an ever-widening circle of reactions. When a stone is thrown into the clean water, it does not just drop to the bottom. It creates ripples, which keeps on widening and widening into bigger and bigger circle until finally they lash upon the shore. Similarly, any action creates extended circles of responses, disturbing the order. Any action that disturbs the order, the dharma will definitely bring about disorder, adharma, because you are given freedom. Your freedom should be controlled by dharma. If at all there is a control in conformity of dharma, and if you do not conform to dharma, you will cause an ecological disturbance at the dharma level, resulting in various conflicts and problems. In this section of Gita, you will find how the universe moves within the ecology. It moves in the certain order, and any disturbance in that order is the disturbance to you and to everyone else. Awareness of this fact is what makes person karma yoga. Karma yoga must be clearly understood because it is not an ordinary attitude. It takes a lot of maturity, awareness and sensitivity. To simply say that one should love God is just so much Sunday talk. It means nothing. How can people who are not able to love their own mothers or those who care for them love God? You do not even know who this God is, whether he exists. Bhakti is no joke. You must have a heightened awareness of the whole at the level of manifestation. This heightened awareness is bhakti and is what makes you karma yogi, as we shall see in the group. Later in this group of verses, Arjuna was told by Krishna to take karma yoga, and he was also told that karma action binds the person who performs action. Thus there seems to be a problem here. Action implying a doer brings to the doer the result of action. The results of action are either seen drishta or unseen adrashta. Seen results are those you see immediately in this life itself. You can relate directly to them. When you boil water, for example, the boiled water is the result that is seen immediately. The same action can also bring unseen result, those that are not seen by you now, but will come either later in this life or in the hereafter. The prayer or a ritual is a karma that brings about an unseen result. For example, Putra Kameshti, the name given to a ritual performed for gaining son, produces result in this life only. How it happens is not known, only the outcome is seen. The connection between ritual and the result not being seen, the result is called adrashta. The action produces both seen and unseen result is unfolded by the Shruti. How action binds the person. In this way, we see that action does indeed bind the person. It keeps the doer going all the time. Whatever the result is, good or bad, punya or papa, the doer is always there as sansari. For one who can discriminate between the real and unreal, even good result is shakeable. A good result may mean that particular situation is little more comfortable, but it is not going to be completely change the person in terms of his or her sense of limitation centered on the I. A person can become the president of the country because of some punya, not merely because of his or her qualifications. You may say it is fluke or chance, whereas we attribute it to some good karmas. Even though a highly qualified person may repeatedly contest the presidential elections, he or she may never win. For the highly qualified person, the unseen result of winning a presidential election may not be there, whereas for lesser qualified person it is. And even if you do become the president, there will still be problems. Perhaps you think your nose is too big, and having it being constantly in the public eye, you will feel you should undergo surgery like this. Some problem or other is always going to be there. Simply by becoming a powerful person in society, no one is going to alter his or her sense of limitation centered on the I. Therefore, even punya, good results are shekel, a golden shekel. Whether one's shekel is made of gold or iron, it is still the same. A discriminating person knows that both punya and papa are the cause for bondage, the cause for samsara continuing. Karma does not cause samsara, it is perpetuation. It perpetuates it. There is no need to cause samsara because it is already there. Since karma perpetuates samsara instead of releasing you from it, why should I do karma becomes the question. In this verse, Krishna also acknowledged that karma is the cause of continued bondage. Bandhan hetu. There is no doubt about it. If karma is done for reason other than yajna, here yajna does not refer to the ritual itself, but to the one whose sake it is done. Ishvara, by saying that yajna is Vishnu, the one who is all pervasive, the Shruti makes it clear that yajna is the Lord. Similarly, verse 24, chapter 4 of Gita, everything is seen to be Brahman, the Lord. The one who performs the ritual is the Lord. The place where it is performed, the oblation itself is the Lord. The mantras, ladles with which the oblation is offered and so on are the Lord, and so is the result. This means that there is nothing to gain. Everything belongs to Brahman because everything is Brahman. How action becomes yoga. Krishna said here that karma only binds a person when it is performed without recognizing the Lord. When karma is done for the sake of one's raga dvesha without considering the dharma as Ishvara, then it is a bondage. One gains only the result known as punya and papa. Those that come from performing kamya karma, action done for sake of one likes and dislikes, only in the way can it be said that karma binds. It is true that if kamya karma is done keeping dharma and adharma in view, no papa is incurred. However, only when karma is done for the sake of antakaran shuddhi does it become a means for moksha. Only then it is yoga. Karma becomes yoga if it is yajna done for the sake of Ishvara, as proposition to him, or for antakaran shuddhi. If this is not the case, then even worship, prayer, and so on becomes kamya karma, performed to fill one's raga dveshas. There is nothing wrong in doing this, but one should know that performing karma is the way, in this way is bondage. Therefore, Krishna said, do karma properly for the sake of Lord as yajna, proposition, propitiation. And how should this karma be done? By being free of attachment. What binds you to karma are your raga dvesha alone. Karma itself does not bind you. For a jnani, a wise person, there is no problem at all. Karma does not bind the person. And for yogi, one who is not controlled by his or her raga dvesha, karma is an indirect means of gaining the knowledge that is moksha. Thus Krishna told Arjuna, whether he looked upon himself as a jnani or yogi, there was no problem. You find that your previous karma prarabdha has brought you to a given situation. With reference to action itself, you simply have to do what is to be done by you. Another aspect of karma yoga concerns your response to the result of action. You have certain likes and dislikes, and in keeping with dharma you fulfill them. At the same time, you are prepared to accept the result of your action as prasada. In this way, your response to the result of action is not only karma yoga. The action mentioned by Krishna in this verse was not meant for fulfilling Arjuna's raga dvesha. It was action to be done simply because it was to be done. Arjuna said he did not want to fight because he did not want the kingdom. Since raga dvesha were not involved, why should he fight? Krishna's response was that the matter was no longer in Arjuna's hand, and that what was to be done by him must be done. Raga dvesha have to be observed, subserve dharma. What is to be done, we have to do without being dictated by the utilitarian attitude. Actions are almost always dedicated by utilitarian attitude. What will I get out of this? How much will I get? And so on. But Krishna is saying that if something is to be done by you and you do not want to do it, you better do it anyway. In this way, action becomes yoga. Krishna is talking about karma yogi here. One who is qualified to do karma, the jnani is not being addressed at all. For the jnani, there is no problem, because the person knows that he or she is not the doer. There is nothing to be done. The karma yogi on the other hand still thinking that he or she is doer, continues to perform action until knowledge is gained. Krishna now will explain why karma is to be done. In the next verse number 10, Sahayagyaha prajaha srishtava purovacha prajapatihi anena prasivishadvamesha vo astitvashta kamadhuka. In the beginning, the Creator, having created human being along with yajna, said, by this yajna shall you multiply. May this yajna be wish-fulfilling cow for you. This we will see tomorrow. Om Tat Sat. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ गुरुभ्यो नमः। ॐ तत्सत्।